Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I'm going to give you another beautiful IFS example from Internal Family Systems Therapy for Shame and Guilt by Martha Sweezy. There are still a few more examples left here. I have read almost the whole book to you through these videos, but this one is really to illustrate that in IFS work, we can have a lot of basically protective parts that come in and block the way as we're kind of going along. And that's okay. The self is very patient and very non-agended, right? And just imagine you were walking down a path and people or things were coming as obstacles in your way, and you would just meet their concern, or you would never like force them out of the path. You would explain what you're trying to do, that you're trying to get through. Can they help you? Do they have some competing need? Can you help them with that? Or, you know, just do whatever you need to do to to move forward in a way that respects the obstacles, I guess. Okay, so this is on page 234, and it starts with a little excerpt about the fear of death. So Martha says, grief and fear of death can overlap, but they are not the same experience. When young children first encounter death, some are incurious about the implications, whereas others, who are more willing to tune in, are shocked and alarmed. When I run into young parts like this who have been humming a grim tune about mortality in the background of a client's life, I'm often struck by the existential nature of their fear. They were not speaking in metaphor about a different traumatic experience. They saw mortality and they got scared. And just a side note, this often happens to our most sensitive parts, right? When we have a highly sensitive system, I think of it like we have more parts that hold high sensitivity. I like the way she said they're willing to tune in, because our highly sensitive parts are very tuned into life. They're kind of the opposite of being dissociated. And so they really see reality, and sometimes that can make them scared or hold certain burdens around it, especially when they're young. Martha also says, on the other hand, a child's fear of death can be a metaphor for the existential threat of disconnection from their caretakers. So again, we would just go into our system or our client system and ask the parts, and it will all be clear once they explain, the reasons why they're there and, their history. So this is actually an example of the latter, of the existential threat being, or the fear of death being a metaphor for the existential threat of disconnection from caretakers. So this is entitled, Tess Does Not Know Why She's Scared. Martha begins, some clients have little internal narrative and no external knowledge of their early years. They have no parents, aunts, uncles, siblings, cousins, teachers, therapists, neighbors, friends of their parents, and so on, to tell them about their childhood or their parents. They might have clues, such as strong feelings, intrusive thoughts, or memories in the form of physical sensations, snippets of visual imagery, or disconnected sounds. I want to say a little note about this. In the Tuesday IFS community group, we meet every week, one of the members was talking about having what her therapist calls emotional flashbacks. Often, especially with very young parts or parts where the conscious memory is blocked. So it might be parts that are stuck before the age of 3, or there are parts who are blocking off conscious memory. They will come up in a physical or emotional memory. So we'll be flooded with panic or deep grief, helplessness, maybe rage, right? Or we'll feel this sudden disruption in our nervous system. And we can think of these like emotional flashbacks, or I think of them like trickling up of our exiles trying to get our attention and let us know in our bodies where they're stuck, what their burdens are, what their experience was in this past moment that they're stuck in. So we don't even necessarily have to know all the details. Maybe later they'll show us this, but of why they feel like that in order to legitimize that feeling. You are showing me something really valuable that you really need me to get. And so turning toward the panic and saying, wow, I really get how scared you are. Can I go and be with you back in that moment? Can I take you out of that moment? Can I do something with her for you back in that moment? What do you need from me? Right. But they're trying to get our attention by giving us those sensations. So it's really, really important. Yeah, and they'll communicate with us in all these ways that Martha is describing: strong feelings, intrusive thoughts, memories in the form of physical sensations, maybe a snippet of a visual imagery, just like it's like a one piece of the puzzle, and sometimes sounds. There can be all kinds of things, smells sometimes even. Okay, so let's talk about Tess. Tess, for example, was a 26-year-old cisgender heterosexual Hungarian American who was adopted by a lesbian couple in Hungary when she was 8 months old. She came to therapy because she felt anxious on very cold days, was afraid of a bathtub full of water, and had intrusive thoughts about the people around her dying, especially her mother's. Okay, so in this example, when someone has been adopted, like Martha was explaining, there really is no way of even knowing secondhand from other people about birth parents, about their experiences, maybe legacy burdens. Sometimes our parent will tell us about our childhood or about our infancy, even though we might not remember it. So when this person doesn't even have any access to that, they can still get what Martha's talking about. This client, had anxiety come up on cold days. It's like these clues, right, to maybe what might have happened to her. She's afraid of a bathtub full of water, right? And it's like, I don't know why, but I am. My body gets dysregulated with a bathtub full of water. And intrusive thoughts about people dying, especially her mother's. Yeah, which makes sense to me. So Martha says, is it all right to pay attention to those fears? You always want to get permission. And Tess says, don't say the temperature or talk about, Okay, so it sounds like there are parts that feel really fearful to go toward this. Again, I just want to encourage everyone to take seriously when your body or your parts are like, don't go there, don't say that word, don't do that. They're revealing that there is a trauma there, that there is something or a part that is stuck in a moment of trauma. So they don't even want her to talk about the temperature or say certain words. So Martha says, okay, but can we talk to the part who is afraid? And Martha says that Tess has a reporting part that says it doesn't talk. Yeah, I have a very young panic part that doesn't talk. It just shows me in my body. I relate to that. Martha says, can you see it? And Tess's reporting part shudders and says, it's a baby. And Martha says, Tess? I think she notices that Tess is being taken over by other parts that are reacting to the baby. So she's kind of searching, Tess, are you there? And then she notes here that Tess's distracting part comes in, and there's a long pause. It seems like maybe she's dissociating or distracted in some way. And Tess says, I'm running a 10K race this weekend. Did I tell you? So she just goes off the path, totally diverts. Again, this is always another part that is coming in. It's like you are going towards something that feels so scary and so threatening. I have to come up with these ways to get you off that trail, right? So, so in my example of walking down the path and there being these obstacles, in this case, it would be like someone trying to get you off the path, distracting you to go a different way. And Martha says, okay, we don't have to go there. Like she's recognizing, okay, you don't want to go to the one who's the baby who's feeling anxious. But can we ask inside about the intrusive thoughts? So she's trying another thing. Okay, so you're having these parts that are coming up in all these different ways. They don't want to go to the one who's feeling anxious or afraid. What about the intrusive thoughts? Will they go there? Tess shakes her head no. And Martha says no. And Tess shakes her head again. And Martha says, okay, I know that some of your parts are in distress. Can we help them? And Tess's reporting part comes out again and says, they don't think so, right? So there, again, now there are parts who are just saying, I don't believe that you can help. So what's the use? And Martha says, who do they think that you are? Again, when parts think that it's not going to work, it's too overwhelming, it's not going to help, you can ask one of two questions, or probably more, but you can ask, how old do they think like if you're doing your own inner work, you say, how old do you think I am? If you're working with a client, you say, how old do they think you are? Or who do they see when they look at you, right? So if you're doing it in your own inner system, you would say, who do you see when you look at me? And again, just be open for whatever answer comes back without thinking it up. And they will reveal to you if you're blended with another part that they're seeing. And of course, they don't trust that part. So they really need to get to know yourself, the you that's not a part. So Martha says, who do they think you are? And Tess says, too little. And Martha says, them or you? And Tess nods. And Martha says, okay, so everyone is little? And she nods. And he says, so how do you feel toward them? There's no answer. So Martha continues and says, I will talk with them directly and you can listen. I want to talk with the part who tells Tess that the people around her are going to die. Are you there? Okay, so again, Martha's trying to get to these parts that are manifesting with these clues of issues for her. There's parts that hold a lot of fear of the cold and of bathtubs of water, right? And then there's these intrusive thoughts around people dying. And so Martha's attempting to go to them and trying to access Tess's self energy, but it's not working, right? And these parts keep coming in to distract her or to resist in some way and have concerns. So Martha is now trying to do direct access. So Martha's self energy is the critical mass of self energy in the room, since Tess is blended with these parts and having trouble accessing her own self energy. So this is the benefit of having a therapist or a coach or even a peer, someone who can hold self energy in with your system when you're going towards something that causes a lot of protector parts to come in and blend with you, right? So Martha says, I want to talk to the one who gives you these thoughts, these fears about people around you dying. And the part who warns Tess about people dying says, and Martha says, "Can I introduce you to Tess? It seems like you want to tell her something very important. If you make just a little room for Tess inside, she can help." And this is beautiful, actually, because, Martha takes the baton in the form of direct access to talk herself to talk directly to this part, but she's very quickly wants to pass the baton back to Tess, right? She wants the healing agent to be Tess's self, but she's trying to now negotiate and talk with this part to let them know, if you will just make a little bit of room inside, not blend completely, to let the Tess who's not a part come out, she can really help you. I can see that you have a lot you want to tell her. So after a pause, Tess's reporting part says, "It's gone." So again, her system is very, very fearful. And Martha says, "What happened?" And then Tess's dissociative part comes in and says, "I don't know." So Martha says, "Did the part decide to leave, or did the dissociative part come in?" So sometimes when a part disappears, there can be a couple different reasons why. One might be because the part is afraid, doesn't trust, and so they leave of their own choice. Another possibility is that a dissociative part comes in and blocks the way to them. So in essence, it's like they're gone because it doesn't feel safe to that part. So you can see, like I said, that in this interaction, there are all kinds of parts blocking the way. There's kind of the reporting intellectual part or storytelling part. There's the distracting part. There's the fearful part to have concerns. There's the dissociative part. So she asks, did it choose to leave itself, or did the dissociative part come in? And then Martha believes that the dissociative part is answering and says, "I don't know." So a lot of times it sounds like maybe Martha's been doing work with Tess, and so she knows kind of her different parts. And there can be tells for parts. There can be certain things that a particular part says all the time. So maybe her dissociative part kind of has a blank face and just says, "I don't know. I don't know." Right? Sometimes people will call it the "I don't know" part. The confused part, or whatever, you want to call it, but it sounds like Martha knows she's dealing with that part. So Martha says, "Okay, that's fine. We will wait to hear from anyone who wants to communicate with you. A part could be really young, but it could still meet you and get help." So she's trying to kind of assure the system, because it sounds like the protectors are young and the parts they're protecting are very young, and they don't know that the Tess who is an adult is even there. And so she's kind of trying to offer some hope that there is one in there that can help them if and when they're ready, when the system is ready. And so Martha says, as this session illustrates, when blended protectors are too scared of being overwhelmed by an exile part to cooperate, the client has little or no traction to access their self, and the therapist self has little authority to help the client get better traction. In these cases, therapy requires long-term patience and willingness on the client's part to engage rather than avoid, which can be a big challenge. And then it's interesting, she has a little asterisk footnote that says, "That said, I'm very optimistic that new medications like MDMA and psychedelics or neurofeedback have the potential to make therapy more doable for people with this kind of internal experience." Yeah, it's really interesting. So this can be common, particularly around really distressing trauma that's happened very early in a person's life, because so many protective parts have built up around the person to help them survive that and to help them function in life. And they're so used to running the show and protecting and helping that person from the point that they were an infant, right? That they're not going to back down very easily. So finding that critical mass of self in order to have the virtuous cycle can feel really challenging. And also because a lot of protective parts, it's like they have this laser focus on the part that they're protecting. So if they're looking at this infant, they don't see the adult self there. And they truly are like, I cannot back down because you're an infant. You can't handle this, right? Or maybe they think you're 2 or 3 or whatever. Of course you can't handle this. So even getting them to like shift their gaze from what they're protecting, this baby, this really fragile, vulnerable baby in front of them, to look up a little bit is challenging for them because they've got to keep their eyes on this baby or else the baby's going to die. So in my experience, it's helping the self like come alongside them and appreciate them and say, I will not go to the baby until you trust that it's safe to do that. And I'm going to come alongside you and put my arm around you and thank you for your service. And thank you for how you have protected this baby until my mind and my body were developed enough for myself to have agency in the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything you've done. And I'm not going to force you to release this job until you feel it's safe, but I want to offer you hope. Can we do an experiment? Maybe you can just make this much space for me, tiny, tiny bit, so that I can come alongside you and care for the baby, so that you can take care of 95% and I can take care of 5%. And gradually we can learn to share this responsibility until, I'm your ally, until you begin to gain evidence that you can trust the Tess or the you, that's not a self. And once you have the experience and you believe that, then you might be able to rest. You might be able to take a shift off. And if that were possible, what would you want to do instead? Because I know you are young. You're 2, you're 3, you're 4 years old. You can play, right? Once you know there's an adult in the system that can help. But early on, it can take a lot of just patience, appreciation, kindness, allyship with the protective part, and proposing very small experiments so that they can gain some evidence, that the self is capable. So I hope you appreciated that example. If you relate to that, or you have any questions about it, feel free to leave comments in the comment section below.